Let's catch up on some Georgia Tech football here at the Voice of College Football. We ask that you would like these videos, share the videos out on social media because you enjoy the content. Others will as well. And subscribe again right here at the Voice of College Football. We got Joey Weaver on the line from the Basketball Conference Podcast, which always needs a little explanation. Joey, how you been?
I'm doing well, Mark. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Good to see you. Joey used to come on all the time talking ACC football. We did an ACC show every Wednesday night, and we would have Joey on for records when he was at SB Nation. Good stuff. So, Joey, good to see you. Let's talk some Georgia Tech football and get caught up on the Yellow Jackets. So I'm going to take it from the broad view, treetop perspective to start because, of course, Jeff Collins took over a program from Paul Johnson that was steeped in the triple option attack. So how has that transition gone in regards to change of offense, personnel, roster, the whole turnover?
Offensively in particular, they're making progress. I think they've made maybe a little less progress by now than was expected. And you know, at the quarterback position, Jeff Sims, you look at the running back room between Jahmyr Gibbs, Jordan Mason, Dante Smith, like all those guys, even some of the skill talent outside at the wide receiver room, like they're in pretty good shape to be competitive in the ACC and to score some points. Or they're still sort of struggling is on the offensive line. And, you know, they've brought in a couple of transfers, guys like Devin Cochran and Ryan Johnson have come in both from SEC schools. And even still, you know, just from a development standpoint, there's some things that they're continuing to struggle with. You see some things during games where it seems like guys aren't even blocking the right defender. You see some things where you get into pass protection and somebody gets completely turned around, like the offensive lineman is turned around facing the quarterback. So there's just some real head scratching things that are happening there. And that continues to be like a point of development. And people are kind of questioning, well, you know, you've brought in some offensive linemen from high school too, since you know, the Collins and Brent Key in particular have been working with that unit. And, you know, where are those guys? And so I don't know if it's just a youth thing, you know, they need to kind of physically mature a little more, but it's that offensive line in particular, I think that is kind of the point of development that's still needed. When it works, they can really run the ball and run up the score on people, as you saw against North Carolina. They scored 45 points, and Jeff Sims and Jahmyr Gibbs in particular were running all over them. When it doesn't work, such as against Pittsburgh or against, you know, a Virginia or something, like it can be tough. It can be a tough watch. So they're making progress. They need to make some more. It's a question of kind of how much time they're going to get to do that and how much progress we'll see in that time. And then you asked about the roster on the other side defensively. It is a little bit in transition as well. There's kind of this older group of guys in particular in the secondary, and then kind of more of a younger group of guys up front, especially on the defensive line. And they've really struggled these last few weeks, particularly in the secondary, which is strange because you've got a bunch of juniors and seniors, guys that have been in the system for 3 years playing together, and it's like they've somehow gotten worse. So that's really the big point of concern for me right now as I assess the program and I assess the coaches is what's happening with that secondary, that you've got a bunch of guys with all this experience and time playing together and they're somehow getting worse. That's not how that's supposed to work on that side of the ball.
Yeah, it's called development in college football, I believe. So it's been an unpredictable, uneven season across college football. This team is right in the middle of that. When people don't expect to see a team from the ACC lose to Northern Illinois, and they're a good team in the MAC, but still they don't expect to see that. And then when they expect to see that or see that, they don't expect them to be challenging what's perennially a top 5 team in the country down to the wire to a goal line stand 2 weeks later, or beat a highly touted North Carolina team that's obviously been a major disappointment, but still loaded with talent, and just lay them to waste by 3 or 4 scores. So it's been all over the place. Jeff Sims, let's go to him because I believe he made his first start in Tallahassee in week 1 last year. Obviously, it wasn't a great offensive performance, but he did get the W. They came back from 10 down to win the game. How would you assess their ability to develop him?
I think you're seeing development there as well. Again, I think it's slow, but it's there. Like you said, I mean, last year he comes in and starts against Florida State and Tallahassee to start the year, and at the time there was a little bit of a question in my mind: is he really truly the best quarterback option for this game, or is this a little bit of a publicity stunt where he flipped his commitment from Florida State to Georgia Tech shortly before that, a few months earlier, signs with the Yellow Jackets, and now let's run him out there and show him what we got, kind of thing. But no, he has been, I think, generally has been the best quarterback option on this roster since he joined. He had a lot of freshman moments last year, and it was a pretty quintessential freshman quarterback situation of, I mean, he would make some crazy throws. He's got some great athleticism and can run and make some defenders look silly at times. And then he'll throw some really bad interceptions, and he'll miss wide open, like just won't see wide open receivers, and will throw it elsewhere. And so there's those things, and those are slowly being worked out of his game. But he's still having moments, even midway through this year, where he stares down a receiver, telegraphs his pass, and he's getting picked off, or at best it's getting knocked down. And so it's becoming less frequent. And I think the more polish that you can get on him, and the more in sync that he can get with offensive coordinator Dave Patnode, the better he'll be. And I think he's got the goods, the ability to be like a top 5 quarterback in the ACC. He has the ability to be a really special player, but it is that polish and that understanding that they really got to keep developing with him through the remainder of this year and certainly into next year.
11 touchdowns, 6 picks, 61% completion percentage coming into the Miami game. You know what the deal is in regards to exposures, that a new fan base gets to see your team each and every week, and just people checking out college football that see different games. So the Miami series has been what it's been. You've been a thorn in their side to a certain extent. I got to tell you that I will speak for some Miami fans, because I hear from them just about every day that they don't necessarily consider this to be a fair, even-tiered game on the same level. So they take exception to losing to Georgia Tech and don't think that should ever happen.
Mm-hmm.
The Yellow Jackets come in at 3-5, 2-4 in the ACC. So yeah, for some people that are going to watch Georgia Tech football for the first time, highlight some of those guys that stand out on both sides of the ball.
Sure. So the one guy that's really going to pop immediately if you give him the ball in space is Jahmyr Gibbs, the running back. He was a top 100 recruit nationally. He's kind of the crown jewel from Jeff Collins and his staff's recruiting so far to date at Georgia Tech. Really dynamic player, can make people miss. He's fast. I mean, he's going to be playing on Sundays. I think next year is his last year in white and gold before he moves on and goes into the draft. And that's assuming he stays and doesn't transfer or something, but we won't talk about that. So he's pretty special. And then the other guy that they'll probably highlight in some way or other on offense is Kyric McGowan. He's a wide receiver, kind of a slot receiver, can play the outside though too. Transferred in from Northwestern. He's a senior, a fifth-year senior, believe, and he's gotten a lot of action. He had a beautiful touchdown catch last weekend against Virginia Tech. That was a ball that Jeff Sims just sort of dropped in the bucket, and McGowan caught it over his shoulder for a touchdown on fourth down. So he's another guy that I think they will try to highlight to some degree. Otherwise, defensively, the one that got a lot of run earlier this year and had a huge game against UNC was Charlie Thomas. Those linebackers have kind of struggled more in recent weeks. And I know that the defensive staff kind of got hung up using this 3-3-5 look and then started getting pushed around up front. And it was only towards the back half of that Virginia Tech game last week that we finally saw him go back to more of a 4-down lineman look. But Charlie Thomas is a guy who he came in as a defensive back, but he's now playing linebacker. So he's got the mobility. He can cover pretty well. He's aggressive. He helps in the run game. He's a guy that can really get a lot of tackles on that defense. And then there are plenty of guys in that secondary again that I believe I should be able to, sing the praises of. But I mean, you've just seen blown coverages left and right. So I'm going to avoid using names because those are guys that have not performed as well recently. We'll try to keep it in a positive light, but there are some guys that that you've seen for 3 years back there, and you'll recognize some names if you've watched any Georgia Tech football with this game.
So in every conference, and obviously we're talking ACC football, there's a different slice to the flavor of the series. When you think Miami football, when you think about past games, Georgia Tech versus Miami, what comes to mind? What does the fan base, how do they view Miami and this series?
This is, if for the outside, if you're just somebody standing around in Iowa and you're kind of a casual college football fan, you probably really would not understand that this is actually kind of sneaky a rivalry game. This is, at least from the Georgia Tech fan base. Georgia Tech's fan base does not like Miami. Don't like Miami fans. I think it kind of goes both ways. So this is a little bit of a sneaky, heated thing where these two teams don't really like each other in a way that isn't really easy to see, I think, from outside of it. Games that come to mind, there was a stretch through the early Paul Johnson era that they had a horrible time playing against Miami. They beat him the first year in 2008. But then when I was a freshman in 2009, all the way through graduation, I don't know that Georgia Tech beat Miami once all those years. And most years it wasn't a blowout kind of thing, but it was, Miami wins by 7 to 10 points, even when Georgia Tech seemed like they were going to be the better team. I can remember being in the press box in 2012, watching Miami go up big early. Georgia Tech takes, I believe, a 36 to 19 lead, like late in the third quarter. And then Miami sends it to overtime 36 and wins the game 42-36 on a walk-off touchdown. I forget who the running back was, but that was a really gut punch loss. And I believe it was one of the last ones that ended up getting Al Groh fired as defensive coordinator under Paul Johnson. I can think of 2014 where Miami came in to Bobby Dodd Stadium at night, and I believe Georgia Tech had the ball like a grand total of 8 times in that game, but scored 28 points or something and won 28-17. Miami barely ever had a chance to have the ball and turned it over like twice, and that was it. So that was a huge win. And then we were talking before we came on here, I think it was 2017. That was a really snake bit Georgia Tech team that went 5-6, but lost, I think, almost all 6 games by like 1 score. And they had Miami beat. They had like 4th and 18, Miami on their own end of the field. They throw a jump ball down the sideline into double coverage. I think both defenders, one of them spiked it off the helmet of the other defender, and it just sort of falls into the lap of the Miami receiver, and they're in field goal range, and they go in and score a touchdown and win the game. So there was just a couple of those really wonky, irritating, frustrating losses. It's been a weird series. And then, of course, Mark, the most recent version of this is the only time that we've seen Jeff Collins' Georgia Tech play Miami, because last year's game, it was on the schedule, but it ended up getting canceled. It was the last game of the year for Georgia Tech, and they had some COVID issues and injury issues, and it just got canceled. But the last time they played was in 2019, and that was, I believe, Jeff Collins' first win against a conference opponent at Georgia Tech, as they went in and somehow, some way found a way to beat Miami. They faked a punt. Presley Harvin dropped an absolute dime of a 45-yard pass down the sideline to Nate Cottrell. That was, for a touchdown. I believe they might have also ran a fumble back for a touchdown or gotten some sort of a defensive score. So, not exactly the most replicable win, but a win nonetheless. And if I'm not mistaken, Georgia Tech now on a 2-game winning streak against Miami, believe it or not.
Christmas is coming, folks. Shop Amazon. You already do, so you might as well use our link. Help us build the channel. Go down into the description section, grab that link. It's the same shopping experience. Does not cost you a penny. Got Joey Weaver on the line talking Georgia Tech football. Basketball conference podcast he does with Mike McDaniel. Been doing that for quite some time. Tell us about that, because the explanation, even for a guy that was talking to you and Mike like 2 and 3 times a week, was like, whoa, wait a minute. You're doing a basketball pod? No, you're not doing a basketball pod. You're doing a football podcast. Okay.
We talked a long time ago that we are clearly not the marketing geniuses around here, doing a football podcast called Basketball Conference, and we get a lot of weird looks. It's okay. First off, fun fact, Mark, you and your channel are the reason that our podcast ever came together. That was how Mike and I originally met, and now we're on season 6 of doing the Basketball Conference podcast covering ACC football. The
nice
nature of the name,
some good in this world.
Oh, I think more than you realize. Although unfortunately people have to listen to us every week, so that maybe it evens itself out a little bit. The nature of the podcast, we were trying to think of a name that was kind of funny, tongue in cheek, and really embodies the way that we look at the ACC, which is, lovingly, but you got to take the good and the bad and just sort of roll with it and make jokes and all that. And so the first thing that came to mind was just the way that people have talked about the ACC, and particularly, I grew up outside of Atlanta, which is pretty well in the heart of SEC country. And people would always talking about, Georgia this, Alabama that, Tennessee, Florida, all this stuff. And I would say, well, Georgia Tech's pretty good this year. And it's like, Georgia Tech, they're in the ACC. It's like, what's the problem with that? It's like, well, that's a basketball conference. So naturally, our ACC football podcast is called Basketball Conference. Now it's a tongue in cheek reference to the conference and how it's perceived. But we have a lot of fun with it, and it's a really fun show. And it's, as Mike loves to say on the show, nobody's safe. I will make fun of Georgia Tech. He will make fun of Virginia Tech. Like anybody, everybody, nobody's safe. They all get made fun of, but lovingly. And we love the conference and like to show it through that show.
Yeah, and it's a really good listen. So check it out, folks. Basketball Conference Podcast. Based on what you just mentioned, and based on, again, the transition that I pointed to off the top from Johnson to Collins, how does he approach the mighty Georgia Bulldogs being in the same state? Is he one of these coaches that, takes it on head on to say, hey, yeah, we want to be the best, we're gunning for X number of championships and to own the ACC or whatever, or just we're staying in our lane, we'll focus on the next opponent in the ACC and whatever dividends that yields, that's great?
It's more the latter. And man, it is a dangerous game to play right now with the state of those two programs. I mean, you've got a team that is really fighting through a rebuild, trying to show consistent competency and be competitive in every game and get back to bowl eligibility. And meanwhile, their top rival is the number one team in the country and the odds-on favorite to win the national championship right now. And I mean, they're the number one rival, yes. And everybody in the fan base, like, it's a little bit of a one-game season situation where if you go 1-11, but you beat Georgia, it wasn't a terrible year, that kind of thing. But at the same time, man, that is a brutal measuring stick to put yourself up against. I mean, you're just not in a place where you can be successful as a head coach if you're saying, we think we can compete with Georgia, and then you go out and lose by 50. So I think it's in stages. If the thing continues to develop and you start showing some competency in the ACC and maybe Georgia comes back down to earth just a hair, like, you can start doing that. But they're really putting almost zero focus right now on Georgia and what they're doing. And they're not recruiting in the same pools. I mean, they're not recruiting the same players as much as we would like to believe that they can. I mean, it's just, they're not. And it's just, I don't know when that changes. It's going to be a while, I think. And so I think the coaches are just trying to do their thing and build, positive stuff on the Georgia Tech end of things. And maybe one day then the Georgia thing will come, but it's not getting a lot of attention right now.
And then, Joey, just finally getting focused back on Saturday, what's the formula for a Georgia Tech win?
Number one, I think you got to try to win the turnover battle. And this kind of goes both ways, right? Because Jeff Sims still showing, that he's good for 1 to 2 turnovers a game. That's too much. They need to work on cutting that down, whether it's interceptions or even fumbles in the pocket. So it's that, but it's also, they need to create turnovers on defense. They have created a grand total of 1 turnover across their last 4 games, which is almost statistically impossible until you realize that defensively they've been a mess and not really putting a lot of pressure on people. There's receivers running wide open. They're struggling to get to the quarterback. Like, there's not a lot of anything productive, I feel like, that I've seen from the defense for the most part since October started. So if you can win the turnover battle, I think that's a big thing to see, is can you create turnovers and can you take care of the ball on your own side? And then always with Georgia Tech's offense in particular, it's, can you get the run game going? And the RPO game in particular is a big piece of what they want to do. And so it's a question of, can they get something going in the run game to help open up the pass game? Defensively, try to contain Miami's passing attack, which has been really pretty hot for 2-3 weeks now in a row. They've had a couple of big wins. Tyler Van Dyke is getting better week over week. It seems like the receivers are responding better to him than they were to De'Aaron King earlier in the year. A month ago, I felt really confident coming off the North Carolina win, and with the way Miami was playing, is like, oh yeah, Georgia Tech is going to win this game easily, even in South Florida. They got it. And the whole script has flipped in the last month or so. It's like I do not get the warm fuzzies of Georgia Tech's chances in this game.
No doubt about that. New life in Miami, and it looks to be another coastal mess unless possibly Pitt hangs on and runs the table. But Miami brought them back down to earth last weekend. Joey Weaver, Basketball Conference Podcast. I even have to look at the banner just to make sure I got it straight. I don't know why, but there it is. Joey, we appreciate you stopping by. Good to see you, and good luck this weekend. Hope you enjoy the game.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it, and good catching up with you here.